Hello and welcome to Rings Check. I'm Barry and today we are covering the fourth scenario in the saga quests for the Lord of the Rings living card game. Here I'll go over the story that the cards cover and hopefully you can find it useful to follow along the story where we're at in the book and get the most out of the theme from the game. Now, this scenario covers quite a few chapters in the book, all the way up to Journey in the Dark, which is actually the next scenario's name. And generally we can gloss over quite a lot, or at least summarise it quickly. This is also pretty well covered in terms of story by the films, if not exactly the same way it plays out in the books. But you should have enough of an idea of kind of what happens if you've seen the movies, but the books do play out a little different. So we pick up in Rivendell. You know, we last left Frodo passed out at the Bruinen, and this chapter begins with Frodo awakening in Rivendell after 4 days and 3 nights. He's been mostly healed thanks to the efforts of Elrond, Master of Rivendell. And we find out a little more about kind of what was going on. The blade he was pierced with was working its way towards his heart and would have turned him into a wraith as well if it had reached. Some of the chapter goes into a little more about who the wraiths are, you know, the 9 rings of men and how they kind of faded from existence. Learn a little bit about the horses, you know, raised in Mordor and used to the sort of evil riding them as such. And we also find out that Elrond kind of commanded the river to sweep the Witch King and these cronies away to help Frodo escape and come to Rivendell. So after Frodo awakens, a great feast is held for him primarily, but there he gets to speak with Gloin, who's not just one of the dwarves who travelled with Bilbo on his adventures in the Hobbit, but also the father of Gimli, who is also here. Gloin and Frodo catch up. He fills in Frodo on what's happened to the company, so the party of dwarfs that travel with Bilbo, and but later on Frodo sees Arwen kind of walking about in the background, so first chance to meet her. After this feast, the guests are escorted to the Hall of Fire, which is a place where many songs and tales are told. Obviously songs and tales are a big part of Tolkien's world and Middle-earth. But here we also find that Bilbo's hanging out, composing a song, the Song of Rivendell, which he does perform that night. Also one elf sings at Elbereth. I'll try saying that again. Elbereth Gathoniel. Whatever. Sings a song, which is a card in the game, which is the only reason I'm kind of bringing it up, but not suitable for this particular deck. But it's also here where, after catching up with Frodo and Bilbo learns that Frodo's carrying the ring, and we all know what happens then. Lucky I didn't put the sound on. But after spending the night and not staying up the whole night listening to songs and tales, the Council of Elrond is convened. So this is kind of the first card really in the game, and even this card only lasts until the end of the planning stage pretty much. So whilst it's a big moment in the book, it's a very short moment in the scenario. But here we get to meet our full fellowship for the first time. So Gloin is representing the dwarfs along with Gimli, and he explains his presence and that a messenger from Sauron had entreated with the king Dane II Ironfoot, offering to return 3 of the 7 rings of power to the dwarfs if they could provide information about Bilbo and the ring. The dwarfs were of course mistrustful, and rightly so, but had come to Elrond to seek advice, so they were just here by happenstance. They hadn't been called by Elrond or anything. So that explains Gimli. Boromir is here, and he's here due to dreams that he and Faramir had experienced about a darkness and a prophecy heard in a voice to the west in this dream that said, "Seek for the sword that was broken, and in Ladris it dwells. There shall be taken counsels, stronger than Morgul spells. there shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand. So Faramir told Boromir to heed that dream. That's also a card that I'm using here. And at this point, Aragorn whips out... I better finish that sentence. Aragorn whips out the shards of Narsil, so the sword that was broken, and reveals himself as the rightful king of Gondor. Now, the difference between the books and the movies, if you haven't seen it, Aragorn's far more ready to accept his role as king of Gondor in the books, whereas he has much more of a journey in the films, coming from I don't want it, she's my queen, to eventually taking on the role. But here he reveals it, and then Frodo steps forward, showing the ring, and that he's, the halfling from the rhyme. So Boromir, of course, wants to use the ring and defeat the enemy, but advised against it as the power would corrupt him. So that's shown here in this burden, which you may end up earning during this scenario. But this lust for the ring, as we know Boromir has, but only from a place for wanting to do good. Easier said than done. So during the council, we learn a little bit more about Gollum, and that he's abroad in the land, and that Gandalf's delay, if we remember, we've still got that. What caused Gandalf's delay? And it was, of course, the treason of Isengard. Gandalf was captured by Saruman, who had been seduced by his lust for power and wanted the ring for himself to supplant Sauron. So Gandalf was captured and only escaped thanks to the Eagle Gwaihir and the horse Shadowfax, getting him to Rivendell in time for this meeting. So here all the companions, including Legolas, Gandalf, Aragorn himself, and Sam has also been called to this meeting. Here they discuss about how to deal with the ring, and nobody has any good solutions. The only way to really deal with it, or destroy it, is to melt it in the fires it was forged in, Mount Doom, which is, as we know, in deepest, darkest Mordor. With a bit more bickering about what was going to happen, Frodo was eventually chosen to carry the ring along with Sam and take it to Mordor. But at this point, only those two are kind of chosen to go. So now we get into the titular chapter for the scenario. The ring goes south, and unlike the movie, the Fellowship remain at Rivendell for about 2 months, while scouts go out looking for the Black Riders. Try and find some sign of them. Where are they? Where are they going? What are they doing? But once word comes back, not being able to find anything for them, the group eventually decide to leave. Now, Merry and Pippin get on board at this point, because, well, they kind of get on board the day after the meeting. They're very miffed that they weren't invited and that this was decided without them, so they've decided that they're also going. And once that's kind of apparent that is the group, Elrond decides that 9 should go. So to match the enemy's agents, the 9 ring wraiths. So here Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, Boromir, and of course Gandalf all go along with the hobbits. And so that takes us into the next stage of the scenario, the 9 walkers. And whilst I'll go into my deck a little more in depth before the playthrough, here I've put in the Fellowship. Cannot play non-unique allies. Well, I didn't really want to play any anyway, and if you control exactly 9, you get a nice bonus on side B of this contract, so threw that in as well. And that is now the sort of Fellowship formed, so to speak. Before leaving, because it's been 2 months, in the movies we don't get to see the shards of Narsil reformed until later, but here it's been made into Anduril, so the sword has been reforged before Aragorn leaves. So these are all boons that you can earn before finishing the first stage of this scenario. And we know that Frodo gets his mithril shirt, and Bilbo also gives him Sting. the sword. So you can earn all these in the quest, and I think you get them all if you're only playing as one player, but otherwise everybody will end up with a different one. So the plans for going to Mordor effectively are to travel over the 3 hills over the top of Moria and come down the other side. But as they set out on the journey, they reach the sort of hills of Holland here, and Aragorn feels as though they're being watched, and he sees a dark cloud and notices the crows, the Crebain. So not Legolas's elf eyes that spot them going against the wind, but Aragorn that kind of notices it. And these the birds have been obviously sent by the enemy to scout out the land and see kind of what's going on round and about there. So once they get to the Redhorn foothills, let's try that again. So it's the foothill of the Caradhras. They attempt to scale the mountain and go over the pass through the Redhorn Gate and descend near Mirrormere. However, a fierce storm prevents their ascent, and they're forced to go back, turn around and go through Eregion into the mines of Moria. Now, 20 years prior, bad things had happened in Moria. We don't find that out kind of immediately, but the dwarves have been wiped out. Now in the movies, Gimli's very optimistic that everything will be fine. However, having had no contact with his cousins in Moria for 25 years, he suspects something's up, but not that it's as bad as it was that all the dwarfs have actually been wiped out. Everybody else knows something bad's happened in Moria, so they discuss whether or not that is a good plan, but the only other route would take them too far south and too close to Saruman, which they don't want to do with the ring. Regardless, as they're discussing it, howls are heard on the wind, and the group becomes harried by wargs. So these are just big wolves, kind of, and that's the sort of next stage we have to get through. After not making it over the pass, we have to get to the mines, but chased down by these wolves. So they have to rush to the Undermountains here, and they get into a couple of scrapes until Legolas finally kills the Great Wolf Chieftain with a flaming arrow to the heart. Now there's no bodies the next day, so something otherworldly had been going on. Kind of made sense that they'd been sent to get them. Maybe that should go at the front there. But the next day is uneventful. They travel until they reach the doors of Durin, which is at the gates of Moria there. And this door requires that the visitors solve a riddle. Speak friend and enter. So eventually they solve it using the Elvish word for friend, Milon. But before they can enter, they are attacked by the Watcher in the Water after Boromir disturbs the lake with a stone. The party fight the creature off, but as they get into the mine, that kind of pulls the entrance shut and rips up the trees at the side of the door, barring their way back out. So now there is no way to go but forward through Moria and to reach the other side. And that ends this scenario. This covers quite a lot of, this covers like 4 or 5 chapters, and does so quite quickly. I mean, the first 2 chapters are really covered by this scenario card, the hills and the birds. By the time they get up to the pass, to try and cover over the mountains, and then back down again. It's just a lot of fighting in this one. So I had some trouble beating this scenario. I tried various different combinations of heroes for the party. You'll see I'm using Ally Sam and Ally Mary because I couldn't seem to get a reasonable combo going with them. So equipped all of them with reasonably thematic cards, and here are some other thematic cards you may want to use. Now, Horn of Gondor actually does nothing in this scenario because nobody's going to die, or if they do, you'll be very unlucky. You're not going to make your money back on that one because you've only got high cost allies that might come out, so that's not good for you. But here, as I mentioned, we see Arwen in Rivendell. Elrond is around as well. That's the wrong Elrond. I wanted ally Elrond, but you could consider there's a very good deck, Elrond and Vilya, which is just a generically good pairing as a hero. You could consider Elrond for this first quest, although really he's kind of left here, and then we move on without him. Gwaihir and Shadowfax are mentioned as part of Gandalf's escape. The Song of Rivendell is Bilbo's composing, and the Elbereth Gilthoniel song, which is the mention of Elbereth is what kind of drives off the ring wraiths. Well, in part, scares them at the Weathertop when Frodo shouts it, although where it came from, who knows. But that's that. I'll cover the actual deck build and some of the tech for the scenario in the playthrough, which I'll cover next time. So until then, this is Rings Check signing off.